I'm now pleased to introduce Cecelia Doucette. She is the co-founder of an organization, Wireless Education. Ms. Doucette has facilitated safe technology practices in schools and works actively with Massachusetts state legislators to introduce bills on wireless radiation and public health in Massachusetts. Ms. Doucette will present what protective bills are proposed in Massachusetts and how other states, including New Hampshire and Oregon, are addressing protecting their citizens from wireless radiation. She will also address what is happening internationally and highlight what some towns in Massachusetts are doing proactively while public policy catches up with the science. Welcome, Cece.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. It turned out to be a beautiful day. We were hoping it would be rainy, and therefore you wouldn't mind coming. But thanks for giving up this beautiful afternoon. Not sure what the graphics are doing there, but for those who have never had a visual on radio frequency radiation, there are devices that help us to see and hear this, and having one of these in hand is probably one of your best things, because then when you're starting this conversation, it's no longer an unknown. We can see it, we can hear it. Okay. So that's me. I'll pop past this, but it's here for when you access the files after this presentation so that you can share this with the others. I'll just briefly go over some of the international policy. This photograph is from Cyprus, where they put out an EMF declaration, and they put out a 16-point fact sheet to protect their public. The Environmental Health Trust, which Dr. Deborah Davis, who will be our next speaker, she'll be conferencing in, she is the founder of that, and they have an incredible database on all the efforts happening in the world, lest we feel isolated here in the United States. So, good news. France already has a national law that prohibits any kind of wireless around preschools, kindergartens, nursery schools. In the upper grades, the default is off. You only turn wireless on when absolutely needed, and preferably when there are no children in the building. They do not allow children under the age of 16 to have cell phones at school. As our other speakers mentioned, there are already places putting moratoriums on 5G. Belgium, Rome, there are other states throughout Switzerland that are doing the same. And importantly, as Camilla noted, there are usually three stems that get things moving. One is you and I have to speak up, get our communities informed, and then use our voice to change public policy. That's the second one. And then the third one is through legal action. And there are already lawsuits being won in many places in the United States and abroad. So Deborah Davis, again, her Environmental Health Trust chronicles a lot of that. And another secret that the industry doesn't share with our communities when they bring in all these wonderful contracts is that Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re have long since recognized that radio frequency radiation is a leading financial risk. Lloyd's of London has an exclusion in their policies where they won't cover the risks. So when our towns sign these contracts, guess who's left holding the bag? And as others have said, our international scientists, not just, any old scientists, hundreds who have devoted their lives to researching radio frequency radiation impacts, put forth an international appeal to the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and all of its member states in 2015. And for the last 5 years, we've been asking, well, what are they doing? In 2020, the World Health Organization has now put a call out for a systematic review of the radio frequency impacts on cancer, reproduction, cognitive impairment, symptoms, oxidative stress, pain, burns, cataract, and those heat-related illnesses. So they are finally starting to take some movement on this. But how long might that take? In 2011, they declared this as a Group 2B possible human carcinogen, and now we know scientifically it does cause cancer. So don't wait for public policy to catch up, but at least they're finally starting to take these steps in the right direction. One of the measures that I am so pleased to share with you today was actually initiated by a woman who's with us today from New Hampshire. She explained to her state rep what the wireless issue is after she had become very ill and none of her doctors or specialists could properly diagnose her till somebody told her that it sounds like she's electrically sensitive. Thank goodness she has recovered her health, and when Rep. Pat Abrami went knocking on the door for the vote, she invited him in, she educated him, he listened. He then, being an engineer, went and did the deep dive and had this major wow moment, like, wow, what have we done here? Okay, so Rep. Abrami wrote a bill that was introduced in 2019, and he put very pointed language in there about the insurance industry, about what the fine print says, because in every one of your devices it says right there, keep this device at a distance from your body, or you may exceed those FCC guidelines, which, by the way, were never safety tested. So why are all of the peer-reviewed literature studies being ignored by the FCC? Why do they allow 100 times more radiation at our public than other countries do? And for goodness sakes, what is the cumulative effect of all these different frequencies that we're now imposing on us and our children? So God bless Representative Patrick Abrami and Dr. Tom Sherman, who is a senator who co-sponsored that bill. That bill passed the House Committee on Telecom, Utilities, and Energy, and then it passed the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. Governor Sununu signed it into law. They got that through in 7 months, right? And now they have formed their commission. Dr. Sheckley just spoke recently with them. Dr. Elrou is on the commission, and he and I and Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada went and testified to get that bill passed, along with a lot of really good citizens from New Hampshire. And thank you to those who drove down today to be with us. Oregon just passed an emergency law. Senator Anderson is a retired public health nurse, so it didn't take her very long to put 2 and 2 together when this issue was brought to her attention. They have an emergency law that, again, passed very quickly, and their public health authority is now assigned to investigate the non-industry funded science and then report back on what EMFs are and what they're doing to us, especially as it relates to children in our schools. And they're now in the process of engaging a grad student who they can get to do the legwork on the analysis on that. But California, Hawaii, Illinois, Louisiana, Montana, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont are all getting engaged in this, be it from the biological effects or the excessive screen time impacts on us and our children. Here in Massachusetts, and I do want to give a shout out to Kirsten Beatty, who Tim mentioned just a moment ago. She has been working her tail off with Last Tree Laws. She introduced 10 bills through her legislators this session. There are an additional 8 that are directly sponsored by additional legislators throughout the state. And all these bills have to come out of the first committee by the first week in February. So if you've given us your email contact information, we will ask for your help with that. It will be a simple phone call to each of the committee chairs to say, please, I care, here's why, and please report these bills out favorably. So when I first fell down the rabbit hole with this issue, I thought we'd raise our hands and say, we've got a problem. Our public servants would be public leaders. They would jump up and fix it. 5 years ago, my senator introduced a bill on my behalf, Senator Karen Spilka, and I was told by others, don't get your hopes up. In Massachusetts, a bill almost never goes anywhere the first time it's introduced. And if it comes in under constituent request, that could be a red flag that amidst the thousands of bills they have to get through, maybe they don't have to pay attention. But Senator Spilka introduced it, and because our gracious actual experts have sent in testimony, because the people in Massachusetts who know about this have sent in testimony and came down to the State House to testify with us. My bill was actually reported out favorably by the Joint Committee on Public Health the first time through. But then it went to study. So last session, Senator Spilka brought it back, but this time she put it in under her own name, and she doesn't introduce much legislation, so for that I was very grateful. And it once again went to public health, reported out favorably. It didn't get set to study, but it did time out last session. So this time around, I went to see if she would bring it back, and she had been elected as our Senate president, and as such, she no longer introduces legislation. And I found out at the 11th hour, and I'm like, oh no. But my state rep, Jack Lewis, introduced that bill for me this time, and he looked at the New Hampshire bill and wrapped some of that language into it about 5G and looking at the health and environmental impacts. And when that happened, that bill went over to the telecom committee instead, which has never put anything forward, but this session might be different. So that bill would form a commission, and that, I understand, is how Massachusetts tends to work. You need a bill to form a commission. They put experts on it, they do the investigation, and then they decide what to do. We have a second bill with Senator Julian Cyr that also forms that commission. He emulated Berkeley, California, which unanimously passed an ordinance that would raise the fine print that's in all of our devices to the point of purchase and sale, and then everybody would have a right to know that this is not a toy. This should not be where you spend your free time. Use it sparingly and wisely. So his bill was first introduced last session, and because of all the education we've been doing, they actually assigned a research analyst to this topic that did the deep dive last session. I don't know why that's doing it. Oh, I know why, never mind. I just figured it out, sorry about that. When the Joint Committee on Consumer Protection got Senator Sears' bills, they did the deep dive. They figured out what this is, and then they went ahead and wrote their own bill. And that's what we have this session as Senate 129. So that's a really strong bill. And as we indicated before, we actually have 20 in Massachusetts. Some of them address children in schools, utility smart meters, both that we should have a no-fee opt-out as a first step. We should never be putting them on our homes to begin with. And then there was a huge amount of fraud around that Worcester Utility Smart Grid pilot program with National Grid. Huge cost overruns that they wanted to put back on the ratepayers. Patricia Burke, who's with us today, has just been a godsend on that. She has done so much legwork, and thank you to the people out in Worcester who have also worked so hard on that. Product labeling, give people the right to know. Safe libraries, Kirsten's bills are trying to help us get our children protected wherever they go. Healthcare training's another big one, but we did have the first major U.S. EMF conference in September out in Santa Cruz, California, for 15 CMEs, continuing medical education credits. That EMF conference, the videos are now available. Anybody can go purchase those now. And the panelists and the Q&A are free to anybody, so feel free to use those resources. And safe community infrastructure is another area that Kirsten's been working on. Massachusetts state agencies, and again, in my naivete, I thought that tell people what this issue is, then we can start fixing it, right? Well, here's who we've been speaking to. Dr. Deborah Davis brought a panel of world experts here in 2015. They met with our legislature, they met with the Department of Public Health, the epidemiologists could talk, same language. They said, yes, we lost 2 positions at 9/11, we just got funding, we can restaff. And then another year was going by, and I'm thinking we're about to lock our kids in schools with radio frequency radiation that we know is a toxin. So I reached out to the DPH and said, look, I'm a tech writer by trade. I've learned my way around this issue, and what I haven't figured out yet, I've been so privileged to meet with world-leading experts who can help us fill in the gaps. And as a mom, I would get fact sheets from the DPH through my schools, like on lead in drinking water. So I said, would it help you if I used my skill set and wrote a fact sheet? So I basically hollowed out the lead one and I put EMFs in. We went through a couple of versions and it was great. They said, yeah, that would be a great way to get us started. We got a couple of versions in, and they said, this is great, we'll take it from here. He vetted it through, Dr. Bob Knorr vetted it up to his manager. She said, great, let's send it down to graphic design. And I said, awesome, when will we have these out to the public? And they said, it usually takes about 3 months. Well, it's now been 3+ years, and those fact sheets have yet to see the light of day. So I was with the Department of Education, elementary and secondary education, and speaking to one of their leadership members, and I said, so who does the DPH report to? Because our Board of Education is just waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. That doesn't sit very well with me. I don't know about all the moms and dads and grandparents in the room, but somebody needs to step up. So I set up a meeting with the Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees the DPH, and we had what I thought was an exceptionally good meeting on July 31st, just this past. And nothing. And our children are still exposed to high levels of radio frequency radiation. And worse, Dr. Joel Moskowitz of the UC Berkeley wound up suing California to release a cell phone fact sheet that had been written in 2009. He had to sue them before they released it in December of 2017. So when he found out that we had worked on fact sheets here, Dr. Moskowitz put in a Freedom of Information Act request to our DPH, which denied it, saying it was still in draft form. So then he went over to the editor of the Boston Globe and said, you may be interested in knowing that your DPH is sitting on critically important information for the residents of the Commonwealth. So finally, and I had been calling the Globe for a long time, but finally they did a story, and the DPH said they would have those fact sheets out within 6 months, and what did they do? Within a couple of weeks of that story coming, they put up a page on EMFs, on the state's radiation risk control on EMFs, that says, no direct damage. So we got some work to do in Massachusetts. So the Department of Public Utilities, Patricia Burke had let me know that there was going to be a hearing on that fraudulent activity with the smart grid. And we went in, and it was actually pretty cool. At the State House, you get 3 minutes to testify on a bill. We go to the Public Utilities hearing, and we said, how much time do we have? And they said, oh, we got the room for like 3 or 4 hours. So we really got to educate that day. It was phenomenal. And Janet Johnson came with us that day too. She's a special education teacher. And so we thought we did a really good thing. The Office of the Attorney General was there. They had 2 assistant attorneys general there. And again, nothing. So, schools. So see that little Boston Parents paper? My first bill came out in 2015, and for 2 years as I investigated this, I had nobody I could speak to, right? And then we had this public hearing, we had this panel of experts come here, and then this just shows up in our libraries and in our grocery stores. It's a free parenting magazine, and I'm looking at it and go, where did that come from? It was Camilla. And Dr. Martha Herbert, who founded the Autism Lab at Mass General Hospital, she had done a press release months prior. That wizened editor saved it for the back-to-school issue, right? So that was really cool. When I first investigated this, I'm finding things like the French National Library took wireless out in 2008. I'm finding pockets of Belgium and Israel who have already taken wireless out of the school, so I'm sharing this with my schools. But I got back crickets, and it wasn't until they read the legal fine print. Can anybody raise their hand if they know how to get to that legal fine print in an iPhone? Okay, so a lot of you don't. I'm going to take a moment. This is one of the most effective ways for me to open the conversation with newbies. If you have an iPhone, you go into settings. Okay, we'll give you a sec. Take a moment, because this is important, and I apologize if we run over in a minute, but this is really important. Once you're in settings, scroll down and hit General. If it's an older phone, you go up and hit About. If it's a newer phone, and from About, you go all the way down to Legal. If it's a newer phone from General, you just go all the way down to Legal and Regulatory. And at the bottom there, you will see RF exposure, which of course we now know is radio frequency radiation or two-way microwave radiation that they politely call energy. And it says right there, keep this device at a distance from your body and use a hands-free option, because touching that one device today, you're getting radiation from 5 or 6 separate antennas constantly pulsing for a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. So we became the first in the nation to even have that little sign hanging in our classrooms. And thank you to Dr. Davis for telling us that we were the first, but they're still waiting for higher authorities to actually turn off the Wi-Fi. Worcester Public Schools has investigated this. They have an RF notice on their website. Just this fall, one of the Waldorf schools, the high school, turned off the Wi-Fi, so a big shout out to that. Dover Sherborne, we have Corinne Whitaker with us here today. She fought tooth and nail with other residents. They got a cell tower stopped at Dover Sherborne High School. Wayland Middle School's wellness teacher is on this now. So good news all over. This is an excellent resource to talk to your schools. Questioning the safety of our children's exposure to wireless radiation. We did another expert panel last year, and that's there for the entire world to see. And I already talked about the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The New York Times did a series of articles about what Silicon Valley executives are doing. They're sending their children to schools with no technology. They're having their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. So it's high time we catch up. Maryland, however, has become the first in the nation at a public health level to recommend hardwiring schools. And just a quick list of excellent things that are happening. Jim Tigas is with us today. He is a select member in Burlington. Their town worked long and hard through 5 or 6 drafts of a small cell policy. In the end, Verizon withdrew their 7 small cell antennas. So lots of good examples there. 5G Crisis with Patty and Doug Wood have taken that and made that be a national template. Any town can now grab that and run with it. Bedford, Lincoln, Southborough are already in position to adopt that. Burlington. So Jim, thank you so much. Cell tower pushback. Centerville concerned citizens. Cell tower in the church steeple. They had no right to grant any kind of an application for that because it's a protected district. Who knew? Now they're fighting it. Holliston has now just gotten a group of citizens together because I think it's AT&T or T-Mobile wants to now start putting RF equipment on top of the high voltage power lines that are abutting these neighborhoods. There's a lawsuit out on Chappaquiddick for a neighbor who put a cell tower on his property. Dover Sherborne, doing great out there. Concord, thank you everybody from Concord for the hard work to get that cell tower application away from your downtown and that arts cupola. And just this week, Richard Longland and Rebecca Hull educated the community, and they decided not to grant the industry a variance to put a really tall tower up when they could only put it up at a certain height. So don't let them tell you that this is inevitable. Utility smart meters we've talked about, but there's a woman in Massachusetts who has a doctor's note that she cannot be exposed to radio frequency. Bridgewater owns their own utility and they shut off her water. Right? So maybe we can all give a call to Bridgewater. All right, Wayland brought us in to educate. They have the biggest setback that we know of in Massachusetts, a 900-foot setback for cell towers. So that's how to protect your community. Get your bylaws straight. And they voted not to let the smart water meters in. Okay, lessons learned. Right? There's so much good happening. I know it's been like drinking out of a fire hose today, but there's a lot of good news. Don't go it alone. I raised my hand and thought we had a problem. I should have educated everybody around me first, parents, grandparents, teachers, nurses, doctors, then go in collectively, and that's where you see change. Be very calm. The amygdala will do what the amygdala will do, fight, flight, or freeze if you freak people out. Calm, professional with the facts. Have a radio frequency meter in hand because now you can see it. Understand what their constructs are. I just thought everyone would fix it, but they have to go through their own protocols. So know what those are so that you can help them be supported in achieving their ends. Work together toward hardwired solutions and don't expect somebody else to fix this. Keep the process moving. If you haven't heard back, politely ask again and again and again. Don't go away. Okay, so I'm very pleased to announce that we have just launched Massachusetts for Safe Technology. A number of us in the room have been meeting on a monthly basis. We do a monthly conference call. If you would like to be involved in that and keep abreast of what's happening and give information to what's happening with you and your town, go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology, or ma4safetech.org, and we'll give you action items you can do. And nationally, please sign up with 5gcrisis.com. They're the ones who took the Burlington Ordinance and made it accessible to everybody. They've got a whole toolkit of things to use in our communities, and they'll go to DC to our federal legislators and take it with our voices there. 5G Crisis Awareness and Accountability Summit, Josh Del Sol pulled 40 experts together for interviews. Anybody can access that content to continue your knowledge on this, and you can have it free for 7 days. Generation Zapped, if you haven't seen it, get your friends and families together. You can now download it online or buy the DVD. And there's cards for our nonprofit wireless education. We have built the training. We have courses that your schools, adolescents through adults, can take for a half an hour. We have the training, same for corporate safety. Thank you very much. In closing, I just want to tell you what my fortune cookie said on Friday night. Engage in group activities that further transformation. So thank you for being with us today.